Good morning. Today is Friday. It's the 12th day of Iyar, and it is, last night we counted the 27 days to the Omer, and we're continuing in chapter 48, Memches, the Moach, a very deep topic that the Alter Rebbe discusses in this chapter. But there is a purpose for the whole, in the bigger picture, what the Alter Rebbe is trying to get is how we can get to love Hashem in a way of understanding what God does to us so we can reciprocate. And in order to explain this, the Alter Rebbe goes on after explaining the previous chapters. What he does for us, he takes us out from the darkest places and he gives us the ability to connect to him, especially when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Listen, O Israel, God is our God. What does it mean, our God? Elokeinu is our God. Just like when we say the ancestors, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, we say Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. You say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu becomes our God. How? V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, through the love, loving Hashem with everything what we have, through the mitzvahs, through the Torah, and so on. But in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain the even greater love that Hashem shows us, and that is the fact that Hashem, what it took for Hashem, for God, to create this world, to create us, physical human beings. It took a lot of contractions. So here he goes on and explaining the idea of the infinity, how big is infinity, what it takes to come from infinity to finite. And Alter Rebbe is going to use actually the example of numbers. You think about which number has more value, a billion or one? Which, let's say $1. What has more value, $1 or $1 billion? Sounds like a very simple question, but it's not, because it's all relevant. If you have $1, compare it to $1 billion, the value is very, very little. It's very almost insignificant. A billionaire to give out $1 to a beggar, a poor person, he didn't feel anything. But at the end of the day, the truth is, a billion less $1 is not a billion. A million less $1 is not a million. Maybe 900,999, but it's not a million. But when you take the $1 billion and compare it to an infinite, let's say a theoretical infinite amount of dollars. So what has more value? The dollar compared to the billion, or the billion compared to the infinite? Obviously, the dollar has more value than the billion. The billion compared to infinity has no value at all. It's so totally insignificant. So, taking this, then you have to think about what does it take to come from infinity and to bring it to a place of finite, of being limited. So here there is the whole idea of the tzimtzum, the infinite God, coming from the total infinity to create the world, to bring about there should be existing a world which is a finite world. It cannot be in a chain-like descent. A billion to $1, it could be a billion less $1 less $1, or you accumulate $1, $2, and you go up to a billion. Here, when you're talking about the very infinite light of Hashem, it doesn't matter how much you're going to contract that light, it's not going to change to something finite. In order for Hashem to bring it to a finite place, God, so to speak, had to remove completely the light and introduce a different type of light, which is in a different category. And it's called the tiny, tiny light, which is completely as if non-existent compared to the infinite light. And all of this, the Alter Rebbe is telling us, again, it's all within the big picture to think and to understand what Hashem is doing for us to exist. He doesn't really need us, but he wants us. He wants us to exist. He wants to give us the ability to exist and the ability to connect to the infinite, to the very essence of Hashem. And Alter Rebbe is going to say that to explain this whole idea of the tzimtzum meaning the contraction and the removal of the light, which is the doctrine of tzimtzum, which comes from the Arizal. He says this chapter is not about explaining in details. Elsewhere, it explains it more in details, but in this chapter, says the Alter Rebbe, the point is just to give us the idea that there is such a thing. There is such a thing that what God does to us, what He gives us, He gives us place in this world. He gives us a place to exist. It took a lot from Him, so to speak, sacrifice. Obviously, for Hashem, nothing is sacrificed. But the point is, Hashem completely reduced and put Himself aside in order why He wants us to exist. So therefore, once you think about this, it makes you easier to feel that, what am I doing? I want to sacrifice to Hashem. I want to give back. I want to reciprocate. So let's see it inside, what Alter Rebbe explains in today's Tanya. That's the Alter Rebbe. V'hinei Protius atzimtzumim eich uma ein kan mokem biyurim. He says now for the intricate details of the contractions, how they achieve their effect, and what they actually are, this is not the place for their explanation. Not in this chapter. Ach, derech klal. But in general, they are something in the nature of an obscuring and concealment of the flow of light and vitality. That light that comes from Hashem needs to be obscured, needs to be concealed, because otherwise, if it wouldn't be concealed, we would not be able to exist the way we exist. And says, what does it mean to conceal? So that the light and vitality should illuminate and reach the lower creatures in a revealed manner. Pervading them and acting in them and animating them in such a way that they exist ex nihilo. I think it's a mistake over here. It says so that the light and vitality should not illuminate and reach the lower levels, the lower creatures in a revealed manner. It should not illuminate. Because if it would illuminate in the fullest way, we wouldn't be able to exist. And again, and the only way that it shouldn't not illuminate in a full way, the only way it should illuminate in only, okay, if you read it in the And with the next paragraph, it makes sense. In only an extremely minute measure, so that they be in a state of finitude and limitations. So the only way that it can illuminate, shine to us, is only when it's done in a very minute measure. And what is this minute measure? This light and vitality that is revealed within them after the contraction constitute an infinitesimal, fancy words over here, very small illumination, and is truly considered as not when compared with the quality of the limitless and infinite illumination. And there is no proportion or relationship between them. So the light that is before the contraction and the light that is after the contraction, the endless light of Hashem before and after, there is no relationship at all. Meaning they are not quantitatively different, not even immensely different in quantity, but of a wholly different and incomparable quality. And here brings the example that we just spoke about, the example of numbers. As the term proportion is understood in number values. Where the number one stands in a certain ratio to the number 1 million. Elef alafim is 1,000, 1 million. Shu chelek echad mini elef alafim. For it is a 1 millionth part of it. You take $1 million, it's a combination of 1 million singles. But as regards a thing which transcends finitude and numeration, there is no number, however great, that can be related to, relative to. Shafilu elef alofim v'ribi revavos einon afilu ke'erech mispar echad legabe elef alofim v'ribi revavos. Because even 1 billion and 1 trillion, when compared to the infinity, do not even attain the relevancy of the value of one in comparison with 1 billion or 1 trillion. So here it says, Elef alfi alafim. Elef alfi alafim is 1 billion. Ribui revavos is 1 trillion. Ela kalei mamish chashiva, for the sum of one retains some degree of relevance, even when compared to 1 trillion. It is in fact 1 trillionth of it, while even a sum as large as 1 trillion has no relevance at all when compared to the realm of the infinite, but is veritably accounted as nothing. It is literally counted as nothing. So this is the short lesson today. Again, Alter Rebbe brings this in context of we should recognize how insignificant we are. No matter how great we are, we're totally insignificant. And yet Hashem went out of his way to put us here. And yet it gives us also the ability to connect to the ultimate infinite God. There's an interesting note that the Rebbe points out. The Rebbe uses the example of Elef alfi alafim, which is 1 billion, the Rib Revavos, which is 1 trillion. And it says 1 doesn't compare to even these numbers. So the Rebbe asked, couldn't the Alter Rebbe find a bigger number? That's the biggest number he could find. A million and a trillion. What about a gazillion? I don't know what numbers we have. Why did he choose these numbers? So the Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe is basically a Torah Jew. Whatever numbers, whatever things, and everything in the Tanya is very, very exact and follows in the Torah. The biggest number that is mentioned in the Torah is 1 billion and 1 trillion. The Elef Alfi Alafim and the Ribur Avavis. Where do we have it? If you remember, we have it on every Shabbos. We say in the Nishmas Kol Chai, the prayer of Nishmas. We say Elef Alfi Alafim Ribur Avavis, and that is taken from the Medrash. So this is the biggest number that is mentioned in the Torah. So Alter Rebbe uses this example, picking the biggest number that is mentioned in the Torah, saying that 1 is totally, 1 even compared to this big number has a tiny significance, as tiny as it is, but it's still something. But yet this bigger number, the trillion and billion and trillion, has no significance whatsoever compared to the infinity. So this is the end of today's share. Again, we can take this lesson, how we are totally insignificant, and yet Hashem shows us the love, and He gives us the significance. He gives us the ability to connect to the ultimate significance, which is Hashem Himself. So thank you for joining. We can take questions if anyone has, and don't forget to share and to subscribe. Have a wonderful Shabbos.